Welcome everyone to the June 17th JEA Board Agenda. I want to welcome everybody to a nice, I want you all to know, you think it's hot and humid. Yesterday I drove to Tallahassee, it was 84 when I got here, got to Tallahassee, it was 98, and the humidity had to be 112. So I just want you all to be really happy about Jacksonville weather, much better than Tallahassee. I'd like for us, one, to please stand for a moment of reflection, and then for the pledge we led by Peter Bowers. So we'll take a moment for time for reflection. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Peter?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a full agenda. If I can ask for an adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So did that. Safety briefing. Rick Dowell, mechanical technician. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
In the event of an emergency and the need arises to evacuate the room or the building, we will be using the stairwell next to the elevators. Please do not attempt to use the elevators in an emergency. We ask that you please watch for any trip hazards, chairs, other people. We got some camera tripods. As you use the stairs heading down, please keep one hand on the handrail. Let's take one step at a time, please. Let's not crowd anybody or rush. Our meeting place will be at the corner of Ashley and Main, which is the church parking lot. In the event of a fire, we have fire extinguishers located out here at the elevators. Please do not use them to extinguish fires, only to clear an exit or your way to an exit. Let's leave the firefighting to the professionals, please. Y. Kendrick has agreed to call 911 security for us, please. If there's anybody in the room certified in CPR, could we have a volunteer? Okay, thank you. That's about it. I believe for our safety group.
Thank you, David.
Restrooms are located back here in the corner also if you need a restroom.
Terrific. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Provisions for the handicap? Yes, sir. There are provisions in the restrooms for the handicap. To the end of the hall, sir. If you exit the room, go all the way to the end of the hall. Yes, sir. A little bit about myself. My name is Rick Dow. I have been with JEA for 6 years. All of that time at Northside Generating Station. I'm a mechanical technician and certified welder. I'm under Mr. Mike Brost as well as Randy Stroop, and I directly report to Mr. David Curtright. And I'm married. I live in Camden County, Georgia. I've been married for 17 years. I have 2 boys. Rhett is 14 and Rafe is 11.
Great.
That's about it.
Appreciate it. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
for being
Thank you.
there. Thank you very much. Sorry about the thing about Mike. We got that. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to call to order, and the next item on the agenda is a public hearing, which I'm now going to call to order. So I will do this by the gavel. The purpose of this hearing is to, 1, consider a new JEA customer choice rate option for commercial customers. 2, to introduce and adjust 2 commercial rates to better align with the current market. And 3, to make an administrative change. Let me make it very clear, this rate hearing does not impact residential or most small to mid-sized business customers. While this is a final consideration of these regulations, the board is going to be briefed on specific rate options at this meeting. Melissa Dykes, is our Chief Financial Officer, is going to provide us a presentation of the proposed changes. Melissa, if you will walk us through, so we'll have it in proper context so we can move forward with an action item. Thank you,
Great.
Melissa.
Thank you. Wait, and I have a one-page summary that's included in your board package for this rate hearing.
And that would
lists
be
out-
on, does everyone find that? It'll be Roman numeral 2A.
And this summary lists out the choices that we're going to walk through. Was there Gonna pull it up here. No. While he's doing that and you have the summaries available to you, I'll walk through the choices. Again, to reiterate, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that clarification, this does not apply to residential and most small commercial customers. These rates that we'll discuss today are constructed with the goal of providing our commercial customers with more rate options to enable them to have more choices in their relationship with their utility, and to make sure that we have the perspective of fairness in terms of collecting appropriate costs from each of our customers. They're consistent with our overall strategy to increase efficiency, fairness, environmental responsibility, and financial stability for the utility. Increasing system efficiency, thank you very much. The first rate we're going to talk about is the high load factor rate. And this is an exciting offering that JEA has been able to construct with the goal of increasing system efficiency. Increasing our efficiency provides benefits to all our customers and really as an opportunity for a win-win with the customers that qualify for this rate. Our assets become used more efficiently, which ultimately results in lower costs to the balance of our customers. And because of that efficient usage, we're able to offer a price discount to customers that qualify for this rate. The price signal that's embedded in the high load factor rate is an optional rate for qualifying customers. They do not have to go on this rate. It's another choice that they can opt into. In terms of qualifying customers, we've got about 25 customers currently that would qualify for this rate, that would pay a lower rate as a result of opting into this. But even more powerful, we've got about 18 that are borderline, meaning with small changes in behavior, they could opt into this rate and potentially see a discount on their utility bill, and we get improved system efficiency. And that's really the purpose that this rate is designed for, is to be able to encourage those more efficient behaviors by our customers. The second rate we'll talk about today is the interruptible service.
Melissa, may I ask you this?
Sure.
Is this something that makes us more competitive for those large users as an attraction for, say, manufacturer or large users of electricity?
Absolutely. From an economic development perspective, one of the key factors that new businesses, especially large power users, will look at is rates and the area that they are considering. And for users that qualify for this rate, whose load factor is high enough to qualify for this rate, this will help make our service territory more competitive.
Do we have a percentage as to what kind of an improvement this works out for the typical high load factor?
We do. It depends on load factor for the individual customer, but on average, we're seeing about 5 to 10% in terms of price improvement.
This also kind of tees us up and makes us working as our partner with the economic development, both with the
Certainly.
state and with the local Chamber of Commerce and Enterprise Florida. And this is going to help us kind of take the lead on that. So, I mean, kudos to the leadership team. I just want to say that before I forget it, before we get to the end of that. So,
Thank you.
Being on the Enterprise Florida board, we are most appreciative. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. The second rate we'll talk about today is the interruptible service extra large demand rate. This rate recognizes the value to our system that very large commercial customers bring to the system. Interruptible customers in particular help with system efficiency because we have the right to interrupt their service during times when capacity on the system is constrained. In other words, we don't have to necessarily build capacity for every single incremental megawatt that they require. So it helps improve the overall efficiency of the system. The rate applies only to extremely large customers, those that are 50 megawatts or greater. And there's a price incentive that's built into this rate design for improved efficiency. So for each step up in load factor that these customers achieve, they get a step down in effective price. Again, it works much the same way that the high load factor rate does, except that it's interruptible. So there's an even deeper discount to these types of customers. Right now, it applies to only a single customer in our service territory, but it can be a powerful tool for the economic development team to use in terms of attracting very large manufacturing type businesses to our service territory. The third rate that we'll talk about in connection with this hearing is the standby supplemental service rate. This rate applies to commercial customers that have distributed generation located on site. Distributed generation can offer great benefits to these businesses. It can provide a primary source of energy on site using the JEA utility as a backup for that generating source, giving them control over their primary source of generation. That backup service, though, isn't free. We still need to maintain the generating capacity, the poles, the wires, the transformers, the substations, et cetera. All the services and equipment that are required to provide energy service to those customers that have the on-site generation. And this rate gives us a mechanism to be able to recover the costs associated with providing that service, so that ultimately we don't have a situation where those with distributed generation resources on site are being subsidized by those without. It's a good cost recovery mechanism for us. It provides an important revenue stability improvement. As distributed generation becomes more widespread, the charge ensures that JEA has a mechanism to recover the cost of providing standby service, which it's doing in these situations. And it applies, the way it's designed, it applies to really only larger installations. It's 50 kilowatts or greater, which is, to give you a sense of scale, is roughly the equivalent of 3 dozen homes or a supermarket type size. And because this distributed generation has become an increasing focus of the rating agencies in terms of potential threats to our business model, and because of that, if this rate is approved today, we'd like to take this rate and highlight it in our upcoming conversations with the rating agencies as a revenue protection mechanism.
Can you kind of just clarify a little bit, explain a little bit more about that piece, about the rating agencies, how their interest in that, just real quick?
Yes, what the rating agencies have identified distributed generation, and it's really Moody's in particular that has dedicated some focus to this issue. They've identified distributed generation as a threat to the very traditional electric utility model. What their concern is that there'll be widespread adoption of distributed generation sources, so businesses or residences that have generation on site, and that results in lower revenue to the utility. So the utility continues to provide standby service to all of these customers. They continue to have all the fixed costs associated with the infrastructure to these customers, but they have impaired revenue collection from the customers because they're generating on site. So there are ways that you can, from a revenue perspective, you can strategically protect yourself from greater penetration of those resources. This is one important way when we think about penetration from our commercial customers, and we're exploring some other options to be able to continue to protect ourselves from more widespread distributed generation.
Thank you.
There's also 2 administrative changes that are included as part of this rate hearing. The first is related to the auxiliary service for cogenerators rate. That's really where it belongs from a rate design perspective. But this aux rate is very old in terms of the tariffs that are on our books. And this administrative change provides an intermediate step to get the one customer that remains on that rate to the newly designed rate. The second administrative change is in the district energy system tariff, and the administrative change is to edit that tariff to include some additional definitions for clarity. We want our customers to know that our commitment to them is to operate in a continuous improvement mode and do our part to keep prices low. And as we continue our rate option review, we'll remain focused on fairness and the ability to appropriately recover our costs, and that'll be the lens we bring to future rate options that we bring to the board.
Are there comments before I ask for public? At this time, I would ask for comments from the public. This is different than comments at a regular board meeting. This is comments just on this particular rate change. If do we have cards for anyone who wants to speak for this part? Oh, I see a hand.
Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Thomas, we need a card. Is this for the public? This is for this public hearing? All right, yes, sir. You have 3 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Come on. For the public hearing, for this part? Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Thomas J. Thomas Jr., 5201 Atlantic Boulevard. The question I had with these new tariffs that you're imposing, where does the U.S. Navy fit into this? Because they already have the extra large demand, which is almost exclusively for the Navy. You have other rates below that. You had the curtailment rates for the St. Vincent Hospital and for Shands. And I'm wondering just where do they fit into these 3 changes that you are proposing? Or
Yes.
Is that an abstract question I shouldn't ask? I just,
No, no.
No, it's a good question. We'd like to take that question, get our rates department to look at it, and
Oh,
respond
okay.
back to you in detail.
oh, no, it's just an academic
No,
question.
no,
No,
no.
no.
Good question, though.
Good
Thank
question.
you.
Thank you.
Did y'all capture the question?
Yep.
Thank you, great. Any other comments from the public on the rate hearing? Then I'm going to adjourn this public hearing after we've all done, and we'll continue with our regular board meeting. If we'll look to agenda Roman numeral 3. Now we'll vote on it, correct? And now we're going to, having had the public hearing, to add new commercial customer rates and modify the existing commercial customer rate in JEA's electric tariff documentation implementation changes to the JEA district energy system rate, and so there is an action. The board, at this time, I'm asking the board to consider the staff recommendation. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation? as
Mr. Chairman,
reported?
I would approve the motion.
Second.
Is there a second? Moved in second by Mr. Townsend, Mr. Hussain. All those, discussion, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Show it unanimously, and we will carry it. Thank you. We go back to our agenda. Comments from the public. Is there comments from the public? This is now on the regular board meeting. Any other? Yes, Mr. Thomas, did you filled out a card for the regular public? This is for the regular, yes, all right. This is your card for the public, for the regular meeting. Thank you, sir. Welcome. Yes, sir.
Come on.
What I wanted to talk about is that I have been personally working with Edward Waters College since 2005, trying to find some way to get their electric, water, and sewer bills, if there are any errors, to make corrections. I worked with the president in 2005 and came up with $25,000, which is peanuts. Worked with Dr. Colorado Williams and got in a little bit more. I'm now working with President Glover. I went over there in 2009 when he took over temporarily and talked with him that I was going to be reviewing every part of their bills and doing a lot of examinations of their properties. I wanted to give you a slight report on this thing just for what it's worth, and I'll submit these documents for what it's worth. Back in 1998, they renovated the Hatcher Stewart Science and Mathematics Building. They disconnected the water and the sewer at that time. The water and sewer are still disconnected. What happened when they did the renovation, they hooked up to the college water and sewer system so that they didn't re-hook up into their own water and sewer. As a result, they have been paying these disconnect sewer charges, and for 4 years I find that they've 2014, 13, 12, and 10, it adds up to $25,000. Now this has been going on for 16 years, and I project that that figure now will be somewhere close to $100,000. This is a variation of what I spoke to you two sessions ago about what's going on with the city. Separate and apart from that, in going through their paperwork and looking at all their physical facilities, they've got 20 old apartments on the property that have been disconnected for about 5 or 6 years. It adds up to $97,000 that they've paid over a 5-year period. This Hatcher Stewart, where they have a 3-inch that's been since 15 years, is roughly that $100,000 I just mentioned. All told, with some lawn irrigation, which they're paying some $6,000, it adds up to $211,000 they're paying for disconnected service. On top of this, there's something that's not related to you. It's related to the millage that the city has hidden in your electric bill, which you have to pass on to the customer. Edward Waters College had a monthly bill of $58,000. and over a 15-year period for restitution is $577,000. So if you put the two of them together, we're talking $788,000 that is due Edward Waters College, and I don't know how they're going to get it, and it's not within my province to change it. Is there any questions if you have?
No, sir. If you will just, happy to have your calculations added to the record right there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Council Liaison, President Bishop, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One real brief comment after watching Melissa's presentation on the rate changes for large users. I think this is a great thing. I think the more flexibility we have and the ability to charge large users varying rates in a variety of different ways is a good thing for competitiveness. It will give us the option of using that as a tool to attract manufacturing to our state and our community, which is vitally important to diversify our whole economic base. Manufacturing is one of the best ways to generate wealth in a community, and unfortunately electricity is one of the most expensive ways to power manufacturing, and so we kind of have a little dichotomy here. But anything we can do to help that along I think is a good thing, and I think you're definitely on the right track in that regards. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, in your board agenda, we have a consent agenda. Let me suggest that items 1 will require an action, and item 2 through 5 are for information. So I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to approve item 1 as action and 2 through 5 as information. Second. Moved in second. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, show it unanimously. We are done with the consent agenda. Thank you. Roman numeral 5B, strategic discussions, update. Wow, okay. Mike, you're the lucky one to say. We're going to have an update on the EPA proposed regulation CO2 from existing power plants. You will share this with Mike, Bud, Melissa, and we're going to ask you to start us off with, Mike.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We're only doing good news today.
I've got only good news. Not sure about Bud and Melissa.
Very good.
So an information item this morning on a very important topic, not good news, bad news, but important, which is the recent rule that rolled out of the EPA on CO2 for United States electric generating units, existing units. You will recall that a year ago they rolled out a new rule on CO2 for new units. This is the companion version that was expected this month, and it came out pretty much on schedule this month. As Mr. Hightower mentioned, this will be a three-parter. I'm going to talk about kind of the past, JEA from a rear view mirror perspective, what we've been doing for really the last decade in watching this, analyzing, studying, preparing for this new rule. And I'll leave you with kind of where we're at today with the existing JEA fleet. And then I'm going to turn it over to Bud, and he'll kind of take us from there in terms of the new rule, how it works, what the timeline will be as it rolls out. We know a lot more today than we knew the last time we met or 2 weeks ago. There's still a lot of questions and uncertainty on the future horizon, but we'll tell you what we know and talk to you a little bit about how the rule is expected to roll out and work, particularly from a timeline perspective. When it comes to making electricity with zero or low CO2 emissions, a good cost-effective way to do that is nuclear. And the third part of this afternoon's presentation, Melissa will update us on a couple of the aspects associated with the Vogtle 3 and 4 purchase power agreement through MEAG. So with that, June 2nd, pretty much right on schedule and anticipated, the EPA proposed guidelines to reduce carbon dioxide in United States electric generating units for the first time for existing power plants. This did not catch us off guard or flat-footed. We were very much expecting this, and again have been planning and aware of and tracking the emerging push nationally to regulate CO2 for at least a decade. A good example of that is we installed 7 new, modern, clean, state-of-the-art GE gas combustion turbines in the last decade. So we expanded greatly our generating fleet, really retiring some older oil units at the time. There was a study back in 2008 out of Washington, D.C. that we looked at and said, well, if this becomes law of the land, what's the impact on JEA? Completed a very comprehensive integrated resource plan study in 2011 and had a number of years ago established this risk item as one of our top enterprise risk management corporate risk items. A lot has been done around mitigation. The bottom line on this last bullet, all of this has pretty much led to the same conclusion as we've studied it, which is moving forward. We're going to need more nuclear in the portfolio, and we've got some things in the pipeline for that. We're going to need more gas combined cycle over the next decade or two, so we've got some things moving there. And I think probably higher costs for the business are in our future for us and our customer. So that's been kind of the consistent answer. We don't know all the details, but that's been the results of our mitigation work and our planning and analysis. Mentioned the enterprise risk management. As the board is aware, we come to the Finance and Audit Committee every quarter. We have our top corporate risk items. This is the top of the top. This is probably our highest scored item in terms of impact on us and our customers and on the likelihood. And the likelihood only increased on June 2nd. In summary, in a very simple, the risk description says it all. Our current power generating fleet and fuel mix, I think I could replace the word may not with will not meet expected new regulatory requirements and likely resulting in increased costs for our business. This really affects predominantly our solid fuel fleet at Northside, SGRPP, and Plant Share. We are fortunate that half of our capacity is in the new gas combustion turbine arena combined cycle. The summary status is a living document. It is basically updated to reflect the fact that what the EPA rolled out this month. We have been and continue to work internally and with others in the industry to evaluate and assess what's coming. Mitigation plans are focused on assessment of what we are seeing, minimizing the impact of the proposed regulatory requirements. Compliance, as we move forward over the next couple of years, compliance strategies will evolve. Won't go through this in detail, but this is a snapshot of our mitigation items, past and present. Have continued in the past and will continue in the future to work closely with APPA and LPPC. From a financial health perspective, we've got good things in place like the environmental charge and the fuel fund charge to help prepare us for future costs. Again, we did an IRP plan in 2011. We have recently added 10 megawatts of renewable landfill gas to our portfolio moving forward. We have continued to refine the load forecasting methodology and have had a lot of success in the last decade on demand side management work, so we continue to have good momentum on that. Excellent board leadership in the past. In 2008 and in 2010, board resolutions were put in place to at this point, we have a 30% goal by 2030 to have nuclear, 30% of our energy in the nuclear arena. And in response to that, we put in place in 2008 the MEAG PPA, Purchase Power Agreement, as well as an option for another 0 to 400 megawatts from the north. Quick review of the existing fleet. These are our solid fuel units. Plant Share up in Macon, SGRPP joint owned with Florida Power and Light, and then Northside 1 and 2. There are the newest units. They came online in the 2000 timeframe. The other 3 units are about 30 years in operation. And for each of those, you see the megawatts of capacity that JEA has entitlement to. And the key measurement moving forward from a EPA regulatory perspective is pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour produced. You can see these units, and this is true of solid fuel units in general, produce about 2,000 to 2,500 pounds per megawatt hour, about twice what gas units produce. And these units that are depicted here make up approximately half of our existing fleet today. Also important to note that there is no today commercially viable technology to remove CO2 from the emissions of any power plant, gas or solid fuel. This is the fleet for except for the lower right. These are the combustion turbines we put in last decade. We have Northside 3, which came online in 1977 as a 500 megawatt class oil unit. It burns natural gas, but you can see the pounds per megawatt hour for that unit are 1650. Better than solid fuel, but not as good as the other new modern combustion turbines. We have 5 simple cycle combustion turbines that produce around 1,300 to 1,400 pounds per megawatt hour, and then we've got one current today out of Brandy Branch. We've got a combined cycle unit, produces way down at the 830 pounds per megawatt hour level. So that gives you kind of a range of going from solid fuel to simple cycle gas down to really the best in this fleet is going to be a combined cycle gas unit down around 800.
Mike, can our single cycle units be converted to the more modern, up-to-date dual cycle?
Yes, simple cycle units can be converted to combined cycle. So we have 2 simple cycle.
Is that an efficient?
Economic.
Is that an economic
Yes.
conversion?
We could take our 2 simple cycle units in Greenland, convert it to a combined cycle. It would be identical to what we have at Brandy Branch with the current combined cycle. It's the same basic technology. They just came online in different years, but it's the same underlying combustion turbine technology from
What's the
GE.
approximate cost of that conversion per unit?
350 million,
Okay, so
approximate.
700 million for the 2 of them.
I'm writing it down.
I'm sorry. 750, I'm sorry, 350 would give you a 500 megawatt combined cycle unit at Greenland, identical to what we have at, it's a 2-on-1, so we've got the 2. The 350 makes the steamer the 2-on-1.
Oh, okay.
So for 350,
All right.
you get a
So
500
it's not double
megawatt.
that, it is 350.
No, it's not, yeah, it's not times
Thank
2.
you.
You're basically paying that to get another 150 megawatts of capacity at a much lower heat rate,
Yeah.
because you're getting that additional 150 for no fuel, and you're producing no CO2 in the process. Okay. When you go to the other end of the spectrum, solid fuel on one end, zero emitting fuels on the other, you're dealing with technologies such as solar, wind, hydro, and nuclear. Solar and wind, solar in particular tends to be the least affordable of the renewables, and it's really an intermittent supply. It can't be counted on for firm capacity. The fuel is free, wind is pretty good, the capital on solar is still high, but it is an energy-only resource. Secondly, the proposed EPA rule that we have seen thus far, regulation is unclear on how landfill gas and biomass will be treated. And if you think about landfill gas, you're taking methane and you're burning it to make electricity. Well, there's CO2 involved in that. When you think about biomass, and one of our options at Northside on the CFB units is to go biomass on those. They can run biomass, but biomass is about as high in terms of CO2 per pound as solid fuel. Maybe not quite as high, but it's the point is in these technologies, even though they're renewable, which makes them good in that sense, they do produce CO2, and at this point the rule is not totally clear on where that will land, nor is the rule clear on how purchase power agreements are going to be handled. Are the pounds of CO2 and the energy produced, do those go with the equity owner or the purchaser of the contract? Furthermore, it's even more complicated if you're dealing with interstate transactions because, as Bud will explain, the rules moving forward are set up at a state level. The state of Florida is going to have a system. We have Sharer up in Georgia, and we'll have a 200 megawatt purchase power deal with Vogel in Georgia, so it's not clear how some of those are going to evolve.
Mike, one thing I don't see in this area are windmills. Is wind impractical in this area of the country?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Wind is, it's all about the capacity factor, or what percentage of the time is the wind blowing, where you spread your fixed cost. It's all fixed cost, a little bit of O&M,
So
no
that's
fuel.
really not an option for us.
So you gotta have, Nebraska is good, Texas is good, high percentage of time during the course of a year that the wind is blowing and you're making this free electricity to pay the fixed cost. It really doesn't work well in Florida. When it really, really blows, it's a tropical storm or hurricane, and you have to shut down the windmills anyway. And most days, it's not really blowing enough to make that viable. I think the closest you come in the southeast is maybe some offshore wind projects, which have a number of challenges, just in terms of getting permitted and accepted. So you, up and down the eastern seaboard, you do hear some dialogue from time to time about offshore wind. So this is my last slide, and I'll turn over the microphone to Mr. Para. But this is eye-opening. The top box in the middle, each bar represents annual pounds of CO2 produced by the JEA fleet per megawatt hour. The rule that the EPA has proposed, we have to begin transitioning in 2020. We have to be there by 2030. We have to get to 740, which is lower than our current combined cycle unit produces at. And you see how much taller the bars are in terms of where we are today. That is due to the fact that our fleet is 50/50 solid fuel gas, coupled with, over the last 10 years, the price of fuel, relative fuel gas to solid fuel, has been such that we put as much energy into our solid fuel fleet as we could to keep the cost down for the customer. You see the dip in 2011 and 2012. It dips from about 1,900 down to around 1,600. That was in that period when gas got very, very cheap. We reduced our pounds of CO2 per megawatt simply following the lower gas prices. The chart at the bottom shows basically the same thing for the state of Florida. You can see that compared to JEA, the state of Florida in aggregate is in better shape. And that's just as you move out of our fleet, which is a 50/50 solid. You get out into the rest of the state of Florida, you tend to see more gas and combined cycle just in aggregate, unless it's not, the state of Florida is not 50/50 solid fuel. So you can see, but even there's a gap between where the state is running at about 1,200 pounds per megawatt hour to this new proposed goal, which is the 740. And to get more into the new proposed goal and how the math works and where that number comes from, it's very, very complicated. But Bud's gonna make it all simple. Thank you, Bud.
Slide up for just a minute, if you would.
Okay.
So that's I'm Bud Para.
Hey.
Really? I just wanted to point out, look again at that graph, the way the pounds per megawatt hour for CO2 dropped in 2012 for JEA, for Florida, for the nation, because the price of gas, the bottom just dropped out of that. So everybody who could burn gas instead of coal did that, and that caused our CO2 to go down. And that's important because that's the year that the EPA picked as the baseline where we're going to start on reducing our CO2. I spent this last weekend in Denver at an APPA conference, most of the time talking about this rule. And a couple of things I learned. One is that the deeper you get into the rule, the deeper it gets. And a couple of our board members were there. It's quite complicated, and the EPA is continuing to add pages to that. So far, we have as a released rule. We don't have even a proposed rule yet. That happens when they actually publish it in the Federal Register, which could happen tomorrow or it could be early in July. One thing that I did understand, I wrote this down so I would say it right, that this proposed, and it's a proposed rule, it will be a proposed rule when they publish it, it adds an unprecedented level of uncertainty to our business, JEA's business and the entire power sector's business, and it's going to require all of our resources plus some, once again, both JEA and the entire power sector, to work out the complications and how we're going to comply with this rule. I'm often asked what JEA is going to do in response to these new rules, and what I always say is that at the end we comply with the rules. It's not a option for us not to comply. Now, we'll work hard on this rule as we go forward to try to convince the EPA to make some changes that will make it where we can more effectively comply, but we comply at the end. And sometimes there's cost involved. But the overall objective of this rule is clear. It's to transform the entire U.S. power sector, and primarily that means away from fossil fuels. That's real clear as to what they're doing. Mike pointed out when it was released on June 2nd, under Section 111D of the Clean Air Act, EPA may impose, it's a proposed rule, but the proposed rule imposes standards of performance. And the way the EPA does this under 111D, which has only been used a few times in its history, is that they set state goals. And the goal is not like my goal to lose 15 pounds. It's like you shall. It's a mandatory goal. And so the EPA has set individual state goals, or we'll propose those on the proposed rule, and then when it becomes final, there'll be goals that the states have to meet. I'm not real clear how the state, how it's who has to comply, I know that JEA has to comply of these. I don't know who at the state is finally responsible for it. That'll end up in the final rule. The headline goal for the nation was a 30% reduction in 2005 emissions by 2030. Let me be clear that neither the 2005 nor the 30% have anything to do with the rule. They had to do with the goals for the nation. The goals that will be proposed in this rule from EPA for Florida is a 38% reduction from 2012 levels. And that's for every state. They started with 2012 levels because there we were already down around 10% from 2005 levels. And the goals will be defined as a reduction in your 2012 pounds of CO2 emitted per megawatt hour generated. So that's how this rule is going to be set up. It appears that Florida's goal is a 38% reduction in CO2 emissions from about 1,200 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour in 2012, that should be 2012 instead of 2013, to 740 pounds. And the way this is done, to make it simple, as Mike told you that I would, it means move away from coal as a fuel to generate electricity. That's all these, well, I'll go through the building blocks that you do, but they're all the impact is to reduce coal. So we'll go through that and we'll talk a little bit about that. If I can find my page.
Well, it also implies you can't use natural gas exclusively either.
Natural gas is not good enough. It won't get us, natural gas won't get us there. Well, I do have my notes in here somewhere. I'm sorry, I've got my pages backwards. There they are. I'm not going to go through this timeline except for to say that we expect the EPA to publish the proposed rule in the Federal Register. Could be any day now, and then that starts the clock. You have 120 days to comment. And JEA will comment. We'll comment specifically for JEA issues, and then we'll also join with APPA and others to comment on the rule. And then EPA will look at all those comments. There'll be lots of comments, millions, and EPA will respond to those comments. And then in June of 2015, EPA is scheduled to finalize the rule. And that's when you can sue. That's once you have a final rule. JEA probably won't sue, but groups that we're involved with may sue over things if they feel that the EPA has gone outside the bounds of the law. Then what happens is EPA sets a goal for each state, and then within a year, each state has to give their individual state plan as to how they're going to implement the rule. So those are due June 2016. You can get a 1 year, the state can get a 1 year extension on that, and I would expect that Florida will ask for a 1 year extension. But to get that extension by 2016, you have to tell the EPA what you're going to do. That 1 year extension for Florida will be that a rule like this requires approval by the legislature. So you actually have to have a law passed, a Florida statute signed by the governor, because this rule will obviously be more than $1 million impact in the state of Florida. So that's what we'll mostly use the optional extension for. Once again, the headline is the reduction by 2030, but you actually have to start complying in 2020. There's an interim reduction, so Florida has to reduce by 38% by 2030, but our average for the decade of 2020 to 2029 under the rule as it writes right now is about a 33% reduction. So you really have to do a lot of you have to have begun getting your reductions by 2020 in order to average over that 10-year period. There's an optional 5-year compliance period. It's real unlikely that Florida would go for the optional 5-year compliance. This just to show you the various reduction goals for the various states, and I'd point out the state that has the biggest reduction percentage is the state of Washington, which is like 90% hydro. Their reduction requires them, basically they have one old coal plant that they've already planned to retire. That's what they have to do in order to reduce their CO2 emissions by 72%. They weren't really all that upset about that. Notice that North Dakota is only 11%. That's because North Dakota doesn't have much option to use their existing natural gas. The way the rule's set up is you have to move from existing to existing. So although North Dakota, there's lots of gas out there, and they're very heavily coal, they just don't have a lot of natural gas plants already built. So that's why they have less of a reduction. Florida, 38%, Texas, 38% reductions. Arizona, in the building blocks, they're assumed that they will redispatch 100% of their coal to natural gas. So I'll talk about that. I won't talk about Arizona anymore, but at least we're only expected to do 90% redispatch. So the way
So,
EPA...
but just on that.
Yes, sir.
So, just, if you did that 90%, you meet the standard, or you have to do the 90% plus they put a reduction on top of that?
You have to do 90% plus, and that brings us to this slide, the
Okay.
building blocks. This is how... Yes?
But why do you, just going back to the timeline for compliance, you made a comment that you didn't think Florida would take advantage of the optional 5-year compliance period. Why do you think Florida wouldn't if needed?
Even though it's a less strict final compliance, you have to move there faster. And I just, looking at it, looks to me like that would be hard for Florida to do.
Thank you.
So the way EPA developed these individual plans for each state was through these 4 building blocks. And let me be clear, the states aren't required to adopt these 4 building blocks. EPA looked at these and said, when I look at Florida, if they'll use these 4 building blocks, EPA says you could do this. And so that's how they got to the goal for Florida. And then they're going to, the intention would be they'll say to Florida, you come up with your plan for how you're going to get there. Here's why we think that what we've given you is a reasonable number. You know, of course, we will debate that. But the 4 building blocks are important because they're different for each state. So the first one is that you improve the efficiency of your existing coal-fired power plants. And EPA said, across the entire U.S. coal fleet, we expect you could get a 6% improvement in heat rate. And so they just applied that to Florida. So we'll assume you can get, and if you could do that in Florida, you would get about 2.5% of the 38% that you're looking for. And then the second building block is really the big
But
one.
before you go off the
Sure.
first one, so is the first one, let's assume that we reduced, or we increased efficiency by 6%. Is that a cost issue? Is that purely a cost issue, or does the technology, in order to do that, not even exist today?
A lot of it's a cost issue. I laughed at this to begin with and commented to our plant people, I know you guys are working every day to improve heat rate by a little bit, and what they said was, that's true, but we have a cost effectiveness on those. If you tell us that money is no object, there are things we can do. Now, whether you can get down to 6%, that's still a big improvement. But there are certainly energy efficiency or heat rate improvements that we haven't done because they didn't make sense, and this may change that. But the second building block kind of flips that back again, because this is the redispatch. So EPA said, Florida, you are capable of redispatching 90% of the coal-fired energy could redispatch to natural gas in Florida, to existing natural gas, if we didn't worry about the cost. So as Mike pointed out, well, why am I going to spend money on a 6% heat rate improvement if you're going to turn around and not use them? And so indeed, they don't count that 2.5% towards the 38, and I'll come back in a minute and tell you why they did that. Then you have the zero carbon, that's nuclear and renewables, would give you about 8%. The redispatch would give you 24% of the 38 that you're looking for. And then the in-use energy efficiency would provide about 6% of the 38%. And in both of those last two, the reason they reduce your CO2, if you get 10% of your energy from renewables, that means that's 10% that won't be coming from your CO2 emitting. You've always got to go back. The only way that you meet this rule is by emitting less CO2. let me move quickly. This, we talked about what, there'll be legal challenges to this. The lawyers I've talked to have said that building block 1 is clear that the EPA can enforce that rule, and that's why they broke that out separately. They'll have a challenge on whether they have the authority to make you redispatch. Some people would say they can do that, others have said they wouldn't. And then lots of people said that they cannot order you to do things on the customer side of the meter or renewable, but your state can. So that, we'll see how that works out in the courts. There's several questions on that we're still asking questions about how this, and we don't understand how these things are dealt with. Mike mentioned the interstate issues. We'll have to see how that works out. Remember, Florida will have to do its own plan. JEA is already working with other Florida entities to start talking about how that plan will work out, and also how Florida should comment to the EPA on this. The bottom line to me is that environmental regulations will now be the chief influence on energy policy, and we'll just have to deal with that. And I'll just say again, it adds an unprecedented level of uncertainty to our business, particularly as we wait to see what the final rule will be a year from now, and then what the state implementation plan will be after that. So if there are no questions, I'll let Melissa.
It's all very clear, bud.
Mr. Chairman, I just.
We can spend as much time on this as you'd like to in the future.
So, we're gonna comment through APPA, and then you mentioned that, the state will probably, would that be Florida DEP that would be doing it, or another?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, have we contemplated yet, Paul, whether JEA would comment separately as our own utility?
We have thought about that, and we believe that we will comment separately. I mean, it'll be an aggregate individual filing on some of the things from the industry. We just want to get our name out there. One of the issues, you've got to make a filing early on to get standing later on.
Right.
So if you don't make the filing today, and then later on find you have an issue, you won't have standing. So a lot of it will be positioning.
And we'll be involved in APPA's comments, the Florida Municipal Electric Association, FRCC, LPPC. There's lots of them that we'll be involved with, but JEA will also comment individually. And I'll just say, we don't normally come back to the board for your review or your approval on those comments. Staff is authorized to do those things. We'll come back and report on it and tell you what we're going to do, of course.
Yeah, as a matter of practice, I think Mr. Bauer made the point earlier, and Bud, you reinforced it, is that at the end of the day, we'll comply, but early in the stage of reviewing this proposed rule, there are certain areas that we think could improve the outcome for us and for the industry, and clearly you named a few. The cross-state, the fact that we've got an asset located out of the state, we've got a purchase power agreement out of the state, how does that get clarified? Certainly,
The treatment of biomass is another big one.
Biomass is a very big one for us, because we, heretofore, it has always been, something positive to carbon, and we've had that in our mediation plans going forward, so we need clarity on that. So I think
Yeah, and I guess the reason I asked the question is, the one thing maybe I've just been ignoring because I've wanted to ignore it, is I was surprised it's 120 days for comments. Comments being due in 4 months from publication date. And so,
that's a gift.
The normal is 60 days.
yeah, but even like in my mind, I've been kind of thinking it's maybe like 6-9 months. But, so do we have, in order to put together our comments and respond to this, given that it's 1,000+ pages, do we have the resources that we need to bring on board in order to put a comprehensive response to the proposed rule?
I think when we aggregate the learnings and the involvement from the trade groups and the other associations we're affiliated with, the answer is yes. If we were going to try to do this ourselves, the answer clearly would be no. We would be out engaging folks left and right to come help us. So I think we're in a good spot.
Okay.
Whether
Well, my
we-
view would be is if we do need additional resources, I wouldn't be opposed to it and, you know, just going and identifying who that would be now to make sure that we don't find ourselves crunched in that 120 days of having to get additional resources to help put something strong together.
This is going to be an agenda topic because we have 120 days and the clock's running, so I'm going to be, yeah, but we're going to have that on there so that if we find we're going to have a problem. I think the issue is that everybody's going to be racing, trying to do it at the same time. We've just got to make sure that we're in coordination and the collaboration is that we're not stepping all over each other or that we're getting the information that we need, because we really get one bite at the apple. So time is our ally if we use it wisely.
And we've already formed a team, and, you know, and this is not our first EPA rule to deal with. It's the biggest and the most threatening, but we've done this a lot recently. So we already have our JEA team together working on this, and we're working with the other associations. They've all had practice at this too. So we feel like we have the resources, and we feel like if we need more, we'll go get more resources on this.
Anything else, Bud, before we turn it over to
Nope.
Melissa? Melissa. This is where the good news comes in?
Yes, in fact, it is.
Okay, good.
We talked about the goal set for Florida of 740 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. If you look at the best available fossil technology that Mike reviewed when he gave his portion of the presentation, it's above 800. And so you have to average in the zeros to even think about being able to get to the goal. So we're going to talk about a zero. The caveat that I'll make, which is the less good news portion of this, is we don't know how this is going to be treated yet. It's not in the state of Florida, and it's a power purchase agreement. So that remains to be seen. But I'll give an update on where we are with Plant Vogtle and other nuclear resources. And I'll start with a timeline. The board was very forward-thinking, starting back in March of 2008, in terms of anticipating this carbon issue coming our way and taking some mitigating steps to help our customers ultimately be able to meet these goals. In March, the board set a goal of a 10% nuclear exposure, and then in June, in response to that, staff entered into a PPA for Plant Vogtle. And I'll give an update on where we are in more detail on that power purchase agreement in just a moment. And then in August of 2010, there was a resolution that was adopted, and I'll just read from the timeline that's here. It endorses the use of nuclear energy as one of the solutions for reducing carbon dioxide. So I don't know who had the crystal ball on the board at that point, but it's very fortunate that foresight existed. Because in January of 2010, we entered into an option agreement for an additional up to 440 megawatts of nuclear capacity from Lee. So depending on how these rules shake out, that may be the only way we have to be able to meet the standards that are set forth for Florida. In June or July of this year, we intend to amend the power purchase agreement that we entered into for Plant Vogtle to allow access to low-cost Department of Energy financing for the balance of the cost associated with that nuclear generating facility. Our option period on Lee is expected to open in the middle of sometime in 2016. And then continuing with Lee, commercial operation on that is expected in 2024 or 2025. So assuming that proceeds on schedule, that'll come in about halfway through that first compliance period under the draft rules that we've received from the EPA. And then Plant Vogtle is expected to come online with Unit 3 in December of 2017 and Unit 4 in December of 2018. I want to spend just a couple of minutes as a follow-up to our discussion last month, talking about the structure of our power purchase agreement with MEAG, which is the Municipal Electric Authority of Georgia, to finance and receive power for the nuclear facility at Vogtle. This is a picture that's up on the screen of how our existing power purchase agreement works. It's a very simplified picture. But essentially, MEAG owns the facility. They receive the capacity and energy from the facility. They deliver it to JEA, and JEA pays MEAG for that energy. MEAG has issued bonds. They're called Build America bonds that are the majority of the financing that's been done for this. And those bonds are secured by the revenues from JEA under that power purchase agreement. That piece is important to understand because security from a revenue stream is a pretty common security structure in the municipal market. Where it's not common is in the project finance market. And that really has been the reason behind many of the structural changes that have been that have to be made in our power purchase agreement to be able to facilitate the DOE loan. DOE understands project finance; they don't really understand municipal. So we've had to make it look like something that they understand a little bit better without really changing the business deal that we already have under our existing power purchase agreement. And that's where the changes come in that have been introduced in the amended PPA. So this looks like a lot of boxes and arrows. I'll just take you clockwise around what's going on with these changes. JEA still faces MEAG under a very similar PPA, but this PPA has now been modified to accommodate this DOE structure. So if you flip down to the bondholders, the existing bondholders for the bonds that are already outstanding are still secured by those revenues under the PPA. Then flipping over to the left-hand side of this chart, instead of MEAG owning the project and receiving the energy directly from the project, what DOE said is that they have to be able to have a lien on the asset itself in order to be able to issue the loan, which again is a very typical corporate finance project structure, but not typical in the municipal market. So power now flows, instead of flowing to MEAG, it flows to this special purpose entity, then back to MEAG, then back to JEA. So, and that's accomplished through back-to-back agreements that all work together to get to the same place we already were, but to get DOE comfortable that they have what they need from a security structure perspective. And then once the funds are received by MEAG's trustee from JEA, a portion of those are sent by the trustee to the special purpose entity to repay the Department of Energy loan. And all of that works together to be able to fund the pie of required funds for the project going forward. The reason to introduce this complexity into the structure is cost savings. The Department of Energy offers a loan guarantee that is significantly lower in cost than any available public markets financing. So the plan going forward is to use DOE funds to finance the majority of the balance that's required for the project. It would be amortizing in years 1 through 30, but our obligation under this power purchase agreement is only the first 20 years. And then there'll be a small public markets piece to finance the balance of it that matures in years 31 to 40. So that's the reason for the changes in the power purchase agreement. The authorization that we have from the board in 2009 specifies that we also had the ability to amend this power purchase agreement to allow for the Department of Energy loan. We may need to come back to the board for an accompanying agreement, which is called a consent to assignment agreement, which is a pretty typical project finance type agreement, but that's not prepared by DOE yet, so we'll have that at a future date for the board to consider. And then this is just a photo of where we are in terms of the progress at Vogel. There's been very significant construction progress made to date, and I wish there was a way to be able to tell scale in that picture on the bottom right, because in person it's just, from an infrastructure project perspective, it's almost unlike anything else I've ever seen before. It's very, very impressive in person, but very significant progress made to date. Any questions on the structure changes or the project?
Questions? Thoughts?
Zero carbon.
Yes.
Oh, I gotta hang out up here.
I do want to not so much remind the board, but to share with everyone that is present that given on this EPA proposed regulation is that as chair that I have asked since Lisa and our good friend Wyman went to the conference, that I'm asking them to co-chair this EPA committee going forward so that they can kind of keep us briefed, working with senior staff and sort of keep us along. Again, as you all kind of bring back information, no good deed goes unpunished. They went there, they had to see it, so they're going to keep us posted. The other issue that I'm going to be working with leadership with is that at some point down at the road, I'm going to be asking, and after talking with Lisa and Wyman and Paul, that there were a number of consultants there that I understand explained the magnitude. Not that, Bud, you all didn't do a great job, okay? But I think when we're this close to the fire, we often don't see the whole big picture as we do. So we're going to think about bringing one of the consultants who sort of explained what this is all about, the magnitude of it, bring them and have some quality time, have that walk the board, do a workshop to walk through that, And then the important part is that I've shared is that we're going to be working with Jerry and Jane and somehow make it available in the public domain as a community engagement with the people of Jacksonville. And since we also have ratepayers in other counties, somehow we will work with that to make sure that we have an opportunity. One of the ideas that came up when I was talking to one of our competitors or one of our colleagues is they were thinking about reaching out to public TV, public television. But again, we'll be working with the media. But I think, one, it's important for the board, for their fiduciary responsibilities going forward, but I think this is a huge opportunity for public understanding and public dialogue to understand it is what it is and what do we need to be doing, because I think it's going to be a collaborative effort with the community engaged. So we're going to be doing it in a two-step. So I will keep everyone posted. And I'm sort of looking at our customer service folks. I think, again, no surprises, and I think that there's going to be some opportunity for having some of our key customers there to have understanding of their representation and make it at a time probably when more people can come out. So I want to be working with that with Mike, but I want everyone to know here that we're going to be reaching out, one, for the board, quality time, and then also to make it available for the community, and we'll be working forward with that. But I also want to let know that Lisa and Wyman, they got the short straw. They're going to be in charge of this committee. Expect them to do well. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to kind of augment the agenda. I have this as chair. Particularly, this is someone that I've known for way too long. This is one of those bittersweet moments that when we hear this. It's a phrase that's often used, but this is a unique opportunity. It's a career opportunity for one of our JEA families. As you all probably read, I doubt seriously there's anybody in the free world that hasn't heard, but Cindy Lacadera is going to retire. The city of Jacksonville is basically in depression over that, as well as JE board is, but she has decided that, I think she said it was time, which I think is the classic thing for a classy lady to say. So ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do is read a resolution that the board has asked to be put together, and then there will be a opportunity for us to vote on that. So if you all will pardon me and let me read this. This is the Board of Directors Resolution, June 17th, 2014, honoring Cindy Lacadera. Whereas Cindy Lacadera has provided the Board of Directors of JA with outstanding legal counsel for more than 30 years. She was 12 when she started. Whereas between 1985 and 1987, she assisted JEA with legal matters associated with the construction and financing of the St. Johns River Power Park. And whereas in 1998, she assisted JEA with a charter revision that included changing JE Electric Authority name to JEA, and assisted JEA with establishing Groundworks, a 5-year intensive $500 million water and sewer capital infrastructure program. And whereas in 2000, she assisted JEA with the Northside Repowering Project that created two 300 megawatts circulating fluidized bed combustors, CFBSs. Michael tells what that is. And whereas in 2001, she assisted JEA with the Brandy Branch gas turbine project and the $250 million acquisition of United Water. She and I worked on that one together. Whereas in 2009, she assisted JEA with the Greenland Energy Center. And whereas between 2010 and 2014, she assisted JEA with the Plant Vogel PPA, the St. Johns River Water Management District 20-year consumptive use permit, and with $803 million in bond refunding. We appreciate that. Whereas her focus and professionalism have helped guide and strengthen JEA, and she will be missed greatly, that's in big letters, greatly by all of the JEA family. Therefore, now, be it resolved by the Board of Directors of JEA that it hereby expresses its deepest gratitude and appreciation to Cindy Lacadera for her lasting contributions of legal counsel and for the Board of JEA. And this is to be adopted on this board. So I will ask for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
I can say this was unanimously adopted this day, June 17th of 2014. Cindy Lacadera, thank you. And in keeping to make sure that we are consistently, as Bud said, in compliance, we are announcing this. We are not allowed to give anything to Cindy, so she will be back next month to accept her resolution in a much better format than as opposed to a piece of paper. Cindy, on behalf of all of us, thank you. We look forward to seeing you here next month. God bless you, and thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you, I very much enjoyed
And we see you next month as a private citizen, so we can honestly say thank you in our own way. Pardon?
It's 3 minutes.
Absolutely. She gets as long as she wants, absolutely.
Make sure you fill out a card.
And go through security.
Yes. Cindy, thank you for everything. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we will go back to our agenda. B, number 2, proposed 2015 operating and capital budgets. Melissa, you have 10 minutes. Thank you. You will have making 2 presentations on this one.
Yes. This is the budget information for fiscal year 2015, and we're asking the board for approval today. There have not been any material changes in this budget since our discussion last month, but some highlights are on this first page here. Our budget is $33 million lower than last year's budget, and it's lower for the second year in a row. We're not anticipating any change in revenue requirements in either the electric or the water and sewer systems. Our budget includes contribution to the city of Jacksonville, total transfer amount of $234 million. Our capital budget enables the system to operate smoothly and it is funded from rates, does not require the issuance of new debt. We have $240 million of scheduled debt reduction that's included in our budget for fiscal year 2015. And the sum of the budget together allows us to meet our pricing philosophy targets and rating agency commitments with respect to financial metrics. A quick review of budget details. Our budget is constructed around an assumption of unit sales. This assumption includes a weather contingency, since we can't perfectly predict the weather going into the next fiscal year. So with the weather contingency, we're showing 5.6% growth from fiscal year 2013. Without, it's basically flat. We've constructed our budget around 12 million megawatt hours, which is where we think on a weather-adjusted basis we're approximately going to be in terms of system sales. That weather contingency number shows a 2.6% growth between our forecast for this year and the budget for next year. Our forecast for this year, which we'll talk about in the finance presentation coming up, is a little higher than fiscal year 13, driven by weather this year, which is some good news for the electric system. It is a 3% decrease in budget from fiscal year 14 and does include that 5% weather contingency. And the water and sewer system, from a growth perspective, fiscal year 2013 was a particularly low sales year in the water and sewer system. So our budget goes back to a more normal sales level of 35 million kgals per year. It also includes a 5% weather contingency. That budget number is a little over 11% higher than their fiscal year 13 actuals and 6.2% higher than our forecasted number for this year. It is a decrease from the budget for fiscal year 14, and that number again does include the weather contingency. I'll move to the next page to talk about transfers. This is the same page we talked about last month in terms of government transfers, and shows the increase in total annual transfers between fiscal year 2007 and fiscal year 15 of increasing almost $100 million per year. The year-over-year increase between fiscal year 14 and fiscal year 15 is projected to be about $1 million in total government transfers, and that consists of a fixed increase of $2.5 million in city contribution, and the remainder is calculated based on sales, so that's based on the sales assumptions that are included in the budget.
Did you say it's $100 million over the period, not per year? Did I hear you say $100 million per year?
Per year. Yeah, our annual transfers in 2007 were about $192 million.
Right.
In 2015, they're projected to be $291 million.
Per year, okay, I see. Yeah, that's $100 million.
And I'll note that was the last year in 2007 before the franchise fee was instituted. So a lot of that increase was due to the franchise fee. From an expense perspective, we show an O&M increase in the electric system of just under $13 million, which does include generating unit outages of $7.4 million, and an increase in our net pension cost of almost $4 million just in the electric system. So that's a continuing challenge from a funding perspective. In the water and sewer system, we've got an O&M increase of about $5 million, of which $2 million of that is just attributable to net pension increase. Neither of the O&M numbers, neither electric nor water, includes general wage adjustments for JEA employees. Capital plan for the electric system is included in the budget at $150 million and includes the substation construction for the Cecil Commerce Center, also a substation construction that's significant at Point Meadows, which is to serve the south side area, and continued storm hardening and reliability projects. In the water and sewer system, the capital plan is $144 million and includes expansion of the Blacksford wastewater treatment facility, which is needed for some growth in sales in that part of the service territory. It also includes the Northwest Water Treatment Plant, which is up near the airport. It's the beginning of the development phase for that project and expansion of the reclaimed water system. From a metrics perspective, we're showing healthy metrics from a budget perspective in 2015 in the electric system of 2.3 times debt service coverage. We project year-end debt to asset ratio of 73%, liquidity of 237 days, and a reduction in total debt in the electric system of $195 million. In water and sewer, from a metrics perspective, we're at 2.3 times debt service coverage, debt to asset ratio projected to decline to 57%. 210 days of total liquidity, and a reduction in debt of $45 million in water and sewer. Any questions on the budget for fiscal year 2015?
This is really the highlights of what we're presenting then when we go as we go to City Council.
That's right, and for your reference, there's a draft copy of the letter to City Council President that's included in the board package materials.
I want to also just kind of, again, underscore for I think all members, except for Hussein, number 7 is that to meet the pricing philosophy, which we talked about when we went to New York, and also the rating agency commitments that we talked to when we were up there. So those are also, I think, will be laid out as part of this going forward. Make sure that that's understood. So we should share those with Hussein about those philosophies and the commitments that were made.
Yeah, we'll make sure to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Appreciate it. Next, Melissa Dykes.
This one, there's an action requirement attached to this one, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Show it unanimously adopted. Melissa Dykes.
Okay, and I've got 5 minutes for this finance presentation, and I'll make sure to observe my time commitment. So it's going to be the short version of our usual finance presentation.
No, you take as much time you want. That's
Up to 5 minutes.
up to about that.
I'll take as much time as I want, up to 5
You
minutes.
can tell when
exactly.
somebody is no longer chair of the finance committee.
I've just pulled 3 of the normal regular package pages. The full package is included in your board package, but I've pulled 3 for purposes of this discussion. In the electric system, sales is now forecast to be about 3.4% below budget, but about 3.2% above last year. So that's good news in terms of electric system sales, and largely driven by weather. I may be the only person in the city of Jacksonville, Mr. Chairman, that wishes that it were as hot as Tallahassee, but we've been doing okay on the weather front, even without that kind of heat. The fuel fund is projected to end the year just under $11 million less than we started the year. That includes the refund that we will be able to credit customers starting in this month, and is right in line with projections and with our targeted 15% balance for that fund. We have a gap of versus budget on revenues of about $21 million, and that's offset by a $14 million reduction in O&M expenses, and projected $12 million reduction in capital expenses in the electric system. In the water and sewer system, sales are 6.6% below budget. We're basically flat to last year, but we're going into the heavy water sales months, so it's still to be determined in terms of how our sales will end up through the end of the year. From a revenue perspective, we have a gap versus budgeted revenues of $7 million. That's offset by savings in O&M expenses of $7 million, and we expect our capital expenditures to come in about $17 million below budget. The sum result of that financial performance for each of the systems is in these financial metrics, which are very healthy. In the electric system, we're forecasting debt service coverage of about 2.5 times, days of liquidity of 223 days, of which 120 are made up of cash on hand. And we're projecting a debt-to-asset ratio at year-end of 75%. In the water and sewer system, debt service coverage is projected to be 2.4 times, 214 days of liquidity, of which 111 are cash, and debt-to-asset ratio projected to be 58% at year-end. Any questions on current month financial performance?
Questions? Comments? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. You're at access. Number 4, proposed access and land swap agreement with Southside Generating Station. Nancy Kilgo,
Good afternoon.
real estate entrepreneur extraordinaire.
Thank you. Nancy Kilgo. I am going to review essentially the same information that we talked about in Finance and Audit in the May meeting. We have been working with primarily the school board staff, the city staff on the economic development side and the Office of General Counsel, and the Jacksonville Transportation Authority staffs together to try to come up with a solution for extending Prudential Drive from the west side of the school property over into the south side generating station property. You need me to hold, Paul? Wait?
Pardon?
Okay, sorry. So we have worked for several weeks with all those groups. We have the legal document framework in place now that will be presented to the school board at its early July meeting. What we're proposing to do is JEA would essentially end up giving up the most land, but we think that this is important for our site to be developed. We've posted these documents on our website for prospective proposers to see. We've put some wording up there that we have the legal framework in place. If a proposer would want a different alignment, they would bring that back and we would run it through all the agencies. Essentially, the school has some requirements about what they need for at least equal land and replacement parking. And then we have not identified funding to construct the road. So that's clearly identified in what we've put up on the web. This is really a right-of-way framework that will, again, go through the school in early July. We'll go to the JTA board in August. And then we will bring it back to you for final approval once we see if there are any requests to make changes to that. So any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Nancy, I just want to say for one of the folks that we have been struggling with this going on decades, and the fact is that you've been able to bring it this close to resolution. Congratulations. This has been a huge impediment over the years. Without mentioning anybody's name, getting one of the folks to the table to even talk about this, it's like pushing water up a cliff. So congratulations to you, your tenacity of staying at it and having it. We're almost there, but thank you for getting it this far.
Thank you. And we have, several approvals, including the city councils in the final end once all the other agencies get their pieces together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When are the bids on this due?
July
This
1st.
property?
July 1.
July 1.
July 1.
Number 5, very important, JEA hurricane preparations. Ed Denter, Director of Emergency. How you doing?
Very well, sir, very well.
We're ready to go, right?
Yes, sir.
Positioned right. Positioned right.
Better get it right. Hello and good afternoon, board members and guests as well. I'm Ed Dendor, the Director of Emergency Preparedness for JEA. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you on JEA's preparedness. As part of my job, I'm responsible to orchestrate JEA's testing and readiness for the hurricane season. So today, I'm here to highlight some of the work JEA has done this past year in preparation for response and restoration due to a hurricane. Also, John McCarthy is going to step up and talk a little bit about the preparedness, standards of preparedness for a hurricane. And then Jane Upton's going to jump up here and discuss communicating with our customers and how we manage that information line. So I'm going to go ahead and set the stage, if I could, for the response and restoration. In preparation for the hurricane season, JEA continually looks for ways to improve our resilience. Over the last 3 months, JEA put forth a concerted effort in preparation for this year's hurricane season. For the first time, JEA aligned our tabletop exercise, readiness exercise, with the state and the local emergency management officials. The exercise was held actually last month during your board meeting, was it June 19th? And this effort spanned actually the entire state of Florida and integrated JEA with the local and state emergency operations centers. The exercise helped improve our overall coordination and communication within JEA, as well as with the local and state officials. One objective of this exercise, or during any incident, is to interface with these agencies as effectively and as efficiently as possible. And during any magnitude storm, JEA responds as a team, and it's no one individual effort. So even though I'm up here, this was not just me responding, this was the entire JEA. So here is a short 3-minute video of give you an understanding of what took place.
Day 1, JEA managers and directors learn Hurricane Jones, a Category 3 storm, has developed in the Caribbean and is about to hit the Florida Keys. The Weather Division of Florida's Emergency Management cannot give the definitive direction Hurricane Jones will take after it makes landfall, but it seems Northeast Florida will be spared. Still, JEA managers and directors, especially those involved with mutual aid, are getting ready.
Make sure that I've got enough water and food and enough preparations for my guys to shelter in place for maybe up to 4 days.
Day 2, Hurricane Jones has destroyed South Florida. It's now traveling north by northwest and should miss us. Meanwhile, the city and state request manpower and resources to rebuild South Florida's electric, water, and wastewater infrastructure. JEA's CEO, Paul McElroy, meets with his incident command team and develops a plan to send waves of crews and equipment every 4 hours to help South Florida recover. A fallback recovery plan was developed just in case the hurricane turns back toward our service territory.
We're going to release 4 crews as quickly as possible, hopefully in the next hour or so, and team up crews both with the water and electric so they can travel together. We're going to go down 95, a little bit outside of the storm path.
As part of this exercise, section chiefs are coordinating with staff members outside this room, making sure everyone knows what to do during a storm. For instance, the finance section chief is making sure everything gets documented.
Everybody who's responsible for a role in the FEMA reimbursement process understands their role and has the whatever forms and resources available to them that they need to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to ensure reimbursement.
Day 3, Hurricane Jones is heading to the Big Bend Panhandle region, but Northeast Florida is still under a tropical storm warning. Trees are down, there are power outages all over our service territory. We've lost 2 substations and the Buckman Water Treatment Plant. JEA activates its Emergency Operations Center. Not long after, the Situation Unit learns a tornado touched down on the west side of Jacksonville. It knocked out 3 transmission circuits, 3 lift stations, 3 water treatment plants, and a portion of a 500 kV transmission line.
FPL actually has the lead responsibility to maintain and repair the line, and of course they're much bigger than we are, so they're heading that way too, but we're closer geographically.
This exercise was JEA's opportunity to practice its storm response role. It gave everyone the chance to familiarize themselves with their responsibilities for storm coordination. Afterwards, participants wrote down their suggestions about how to make things run more smoothly in a real-life situation, so JEA can continually improve its emergency plans and procedures.
Good afternoon. I'm John McCarthy, and I'm going to follow Ed and take up to 2 minutes to talk about our standards of preparedness, which is basically how we manage our critical inventory items during hurricane season. Just for a little bit of background, JEA first implemented what we call storm stocking after the busy 2004 season when we were hit consecutively by about 3 tropical storms. And we did it by identifying critical items that experienced higher than normal usage during that period. Looking back, it was a good initiative, but did not prepare us for the larger storms. Initially, we identified about 150 items, And the number of these items increased to actually over 500 over the years. At our CEO's request, we developed a standard of preparedness to improve our readiness for the larger storms. We found an FP&L study that came out of their experience with Hurricane Wilma, predicting the number of utility pole losses for sustained winds of different strengths, and we based our stocking objectives on these measures. We worked directly with the JEA crews to identify the critical items needed for each pole loss and standardized items wherever possible. We also developed vendor stocking agreements and physically separated storm stock from our normal inventory to protect this material throughout the storm season. If you look at the slide, it'll show the results of our efforts. Our storm stock now consists of 100 items valued at $1.8 million, and JEA's investment is only $1.1 million, since our vendors are now holding $700,000 of the material. But more importantly, we are very confident we have the right items in appropriate quantities to support a Category 1 or higher hurricane. Sabina Price-Jones and Ernie Burnich are here, who they are largely responsible for this work, aside of our CEO who had the idea, and it has significantly improved our readiness for storm seasons ahead. And I'll be followed by Jane.
Thanks, John.
Good afternoon, I'm Jane Upton. We've been very fortunate in our area not to be hit by a storm, but we have taken advantage of the learnings of our utility partners to the north. The utilities that fared the best in customer satisfaction learned one thing: communicate, communicate, communicate. And so we're adding new components to our communication to increase our communication with customers. We started by communicating through social media and through a news release about the exercise that we had in May. June 1, we also had an email there on the right that went out to all customers who had an email address. We also sent a postcard, which you all have up there on the desk, to all customers we didn't have an email address for. We have increased the information on our website by having a new hurricane page to provide information to customers, easy reference information. So social media is also being a tool that we're using a lot more. We're going to provide tips all the way through the hurricane season. We're telling customers about what they need to do to prepare and also what we're doing to prepare. We have a new feature this year that if we need it and if we have an opportunity to use it, that we can actually put a live Twitter feed on the electronic billboards around the city to tell customers what they need to do or help set expectations. We're also going to be doing additional emails as we go through the hurricane season, because we know through, again, these other utilities' experiences that emails and outreach from the utility is very, very critical to customer satisfaction through the experience. They want information, they're in a very stressful time, and the more information we can give them, the better. We'll continue to use paid media as appropriate. And then lastly, how will you get information through this process? Well, we have a daily process where we send out information twice a day to the news media, which gives numbers of restoration, crews working, other factual information that people are really interested in knowing. There's also an incident action plan, which is produced twice a day, and that categorizes all of the operational activities that are going on throughout the utility. And then lastly, I'll be sending you emails about other things that are happening as appropriate, any time of day, weekend, whenever it's needed. So you can be expecting to hear from us on a regular basis. And I'll be glad to take any questions at the end.
Questions? Comments? Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that. When did hurricane season officially start?
June 1st.
June 1st. And it goes through?
November 3rd.
Keep your fingers crossed. Terrific. Thank you all. Any new business? Any other new business? Old business?
So we have a new
Yes,
business item?
new. That will be our new for that, which we passed. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will have it in front of you. And this will be the St. Johns River Power Park, SJRPP, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 1618 Collective Bargaining Agreement. Who is going to present?
Angie?
Angie? I take it good news?
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Board.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
The recently bargained and ratified collective bargaining agreement for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers at St. Johns River Power Park, also known as IBEW Local 1618, is offered to the Board for approval. The current agreement expired on September 30th, 2012, and since that time, parties have met extensively to negotiate a new agreement, and we're pleased to report that the process was recently completed. Through lots of hard work, lots of meetings, and my hat's off to these two ladies, Mary Ann Evans and Maria Salguero. On June 12, 2014, there was a vote to ratify the agreement, and the vote came back with 116 in favor and only 1 opposed. This agreement will cover the period of October 1st, 2012 to September 30th, 2015, and a copy of that agreement has been provided to you. Although there were various articles that were discussed and negotiated and agreed upon, those of paramount significance are the following. The first is that the ratification of this agreement would encompass a 3-year period covering October 1st, 2012 through September 30th, 2015, that the general base pay increases of 0%, 3%, and 3% respectively for each of the years for the aforementioned contract period, and also that access to the group health insurance plan effective for the plan year January 1st, 2015 would offer options for the IBEW 1618 as opposed to the one option that was only available to them due to an imposition under a previous contract. We seek approval from the board for the ratification of this agreement.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to approve a motion to pass this negotiation.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved to second. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor of ratifying it, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, show it unanimously. Congratulations.
Okay, thank
Great
you.
job. Well done. Thank you.
Could I just say one
Yes.
thing, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
since
Mr.
we've been around a few years? I'd just like to say congratulations to the negotiating team on both sides.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Second that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Partnerships are all about both sides.
Yep.
Thank you. Well stated. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I'm going to, reports will be Workforce Committee, and this time I'm going to turn it over to our Vice Chair, Lisa Stang Weatherby, who is the committee chair for Workforce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Workforce Committee, which consists of Ron Townsend and me, so it's a very large committee, was joined by Wyman Winbush and staff on June 4th, 2014. The committee approved the Workforce Committee Charter, a copy of which can be found in your board package under Section 6A1. The committee has agreed to meet at least 6 times per calendar year and will report to the board on a quarterly basis. Staff provided information and the committee held discussions related to individual development plans, talent review process and timeline. Talent reviews will launch on July 1 and will conclude December 31st. A compensation policy for appointed and bargaining unit staff. And at this time, I would like to ask for a motion to approve the proposed board governance policy 2.7.3 revision. In short, this revision states that the CEO will not promote a compensation philosophy that is contradictory to JEA's compensation philosophy of providing a
within the utility, and the recognition of this audit's results certainly supports that. Working directly for Ted, Dan Mishra and Patrick McGinnis and Brandon Edwards on the physical and SIP compliance, Y. Kendrick, Cindy Edwards, and Bill Kernston on the technology services group, and Mike Frost and his team, Gary Baker and Andy Meyer, in terms of the physical side. So really a broad view of the utility. This was the first time these NERC auditors, now NERC is the North American Reliability Council that has been sanctioned by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to oversee the standards of the entire electric grid. So it's not a made-up local group here coming down and auditing us and for enforcement, and we passed with 0 exceptions. And while the auditors were a little cat and mouse in terms of being able to compare us to others. They indicated that this was the first time that had ever happened. So I think the team did an outstanding job. And I just ask you to think about that in terms of all we've done to provide security for the grid. This is cybersecurity and physical security in terms of the JEA assets. So we're taking the standards to heart and implementing it and developing a culture of compliance.
Report. Thank you. Thank you. Chairman's report, again, want to thank my colleagues again for your public service and your dedication to this. It's important work that we do. To everyone that is here, kind of like in the last week or so, we have officially started summer. So I ask everyone to be mindful of little kids in the street. They tend not to think when they're out there, but I want everyone to have a safe summer, and we will see you in 30 days. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.